This is our Unit 5 catch-up video for Europe Seeks Asia and Meets the Americas. Please make sure to complete the questions that will appear on your screen for credit for Unit 5, and make sure to K-mail me when you are finished so I can check your answers and again give you credit for your Unit 5. You can watch this video if you have a few lessons in Unit 5 that you did not master, or if you're still working to master the unit assessment, or a combination of both. Again, please make sure to K-mail me when you're finished so I can check your answers. In this lesson, you will be able to explain why the Europeans used the phrase New World to describe the Americas. You'll be able to identify the civilizations present in the New World and their key accomplishments. You'll be able to identify the main explorers during the Age of Exploration and explain the role of Prince Henry the Navigator during this time period. Journey to exploration. So at this time, Europeans needed spices, and the only place they could get them was Asia. So the Ottoman Turks take over the main roadways that they needed to get to Asia. And so they need to find another way to get there. Now, why spices? This is something we see in our kitchen every day. Why couldn't they get their own? Well, first of all, they were only in Asia. Second of all, they didn't have refrigerators, so people needed the spices to preserve and flavor their meat. They could also use them for medicine, so spices were pretty important. You may recall that they used to travel to Asia for things like silks, but at this time period, the Europeans know how to make those things on their own. So now they're after spices. Here's your question. Why were Europeans trying to get to India or Asia? Go ahead and type your answer and make sure to click submit. Now, how will they get to Asia? We already said that the roadways were blocked. Well, their solution was by water. Now, that's a pretty scary idea at this time because they have no GPS, they have no real tools for navigation on open water, and their maps aren't complete. So what changes? Prince Henry the Navigator comes into the picture. He's a prince in Portugal, and he has a key role in finding a route to Asia. He works on improving the tools that they'll need to navigate, even the ships. He creates ships that are able to sail close to the shore without hitting the bottom. Now, he sponsors a lot of explorations to Africa as well because of the stories that he's heard of Africa. Now, one key misconception is that he was an explorer himself. I want to make this very clear. The prince was not an explorer. He was the guy with the money. So I have a picture of money down here. He was the guy giving out the money. He was sponsoring these trips and putting them together. He was not the guy behind the wheel of the ship. He was the one giving them the money. So he helps improve the navigation tools, he helps create new ships, and he gets the explorers finding routes to Asia and exploring Africa. So list 3 ways that Prince Henry contributes to exploration. What were 3 things that he did that helped exploration? So the question was, what would they find when they started exploring? The map wasn't finished yet. If you look over here, they kind of have an idea of a little bit of Africa. They know some of Asia, Europe, but the whole half of the world, they didn't know what was there. So there's a lot of unknowns, and they weren't sure what they were going to discover. They thought they were just going to find Asia. Now, Bartholomew Diaz is a key explorer, so you might want to write his name down. What he does is he sails around the tip of Africa. This had never been done before. His route is down here in yellow. Remember I said that they had these ships now, so they stayed very close to the shore. And he follows this route all the way around to the tip. He hit some storms down here, and he actually wanted to name it the Cape of Storms, but the prince does not like that name. So now we have the Cape of Good Hope down here. He makes it to the bottom of Africa and sails home. Now Vasco da Gama takes it a little bit further. He goes and he follows the route down. You notice how his route here is in red. He goes a little bit further off the coast. He sails down and around Africa and reaches India. So while everybody else is sailing east, Christopher Columbus comes in. In 1492, he believed that he could go west to find the Indies. So everybody else was going around Africa to sail to the Indies or Asia, but he decides he's going to go west. Well, why did he do this? Well, because he tried to calculate the circumference of the Earth. Okay, so remember from our math days, it's not a very good circle, but circumference is what's all the way around the Earth. Now, he wasn't exactly accurate with it, and he thought that he had found a shorter route. Now, again, they don't know what's on the other half of the map. They just think that if I go west, I'm going to hit the Indies. But he ends up discovering the Caribbean instead. He discovers the Americas. Now, one key misconception is he did not discover America that we know today. He lands in the Caribbean islands. And he returns home with one ship. So now we've got something really interesting happening here. People don't just want to make it to Asia anymore. They've got a whole new world to discover. But you know what? Someone's already there when they get to the New World. There are 4 civilizations in the Americas at this time. The first one is the Olmec, then the Maya, we have the Inca, and the Aztec. So the Olmecs are right there in letter C. It's a smaller civilization and they come first. The Mayas are there in pink, letter A. The Incas are down in South America in the Andes Mountains. That's letter B on our map. And the Aztecs are letter D in the green up in Mexico. So we have 4 civilizations that already exist. Now, what is a civilization? The word comes from the Latin word civitas, meaning city. So these people are city builders. They've started to grow crops. They've settled in one area. They've domesticated animals. They're city builders. Now, the interesting thing is some of these cities were larger than any European city at times. The Aztecs themselves had huge civilizations and very large cities within their empire. So now it's your turn. Write the name of each civilization next to the letter that represents its location. So remember, we had the Olmecs, the Maya, the Inca, and the Aztecs. You can also find this in your textbook if you get stuck. So let's talk about each one of these. First, we have the Olmecs. Like I said, they were the earliest civilization in the Americas. They're around from 1200 to 400 BC. They begin right about the time that ancient Egypt. So if you think about what you know about ancient Egypt, the Olmecs are around the same period of time. They settled on Mexico's Gulf Coast. They farmed and they built cities. Remember, all of these civilizations means that they're city builders. They worshiped nature spirits, and some of their main achievements, we said we needed to know what they had accomplished. They had their own calendar, and they also had an early form of writing. So who were the Mayans? The Mayans have an advanced knowledge of astronomy and mathematics. One thing that the Mayans knew, for example, was place value. They figured out that if they moved the number 3 from the hundreds place to, let's say, the ones, that would change it from 3 100s to 3 ones. They also discover a 365-day calendar, which is even more advanced than the calendars that were in Europe at the time. They were even able to predict eclipses. Now they write in a form of hieroglyphics, which these hieroglyphics even stump modern day scientists. They can't figure out what they mean. They farmed on terraces in the hillsides, and they also drained swamps and turned them into farmland in order to grow their crops. Now, why would they do that? Because it was easier than chopping down the rainforest. They lived in a forested area, so they had to be a little bit creative. Let's see what you remember so far. Which civilization was the oldest in the Americas? The Maya, the Aztec, or the Olmec? Which civilization had skilled astronomers and mathematicians? The Maya, the Aztec, or the Olmec? Which civilization used a form of hieroglyphics? A, Maya, B, the Aztec, or C, the Olmec? If you need to go back and review the video, you're more than welcome to rewind it and review. So who were the Incas? We may have heard of them before, but we might not be quite sure of who they were. Remember, on our map, this was the empire that was in South America along the Andes Mountains. Their empire begins around 1200 AD. Their capital was Cusco. It's the word for navel, which is appropriate because it was in the middle of their empire. Now they had an emperor and an elaborate system of roads through the mountains. Emperors communicated using runners, and they also had a rope system that when it was braided or beaded a certain way, it would give them a message that only the emperor could understand. Now they also had granaries for years when there was poor harvest, so it was quite the advanced civilization at the time. One of their greatest accomplishments was Machu Picchu. It was discovered by an American in the early 1900s. They didn't know that it existed, and this was thought to be a retreat for the wealthy of the empire. So which statement is true about the Incas? A, emperors communicated using runners on the system of roads. B, scribes painted books and kept records of taxes and territories. Or C, astronomers predicted eclipses. So which statement is true about the Incas? Who were the Aztecs? This is our fourth and final civilization. Now, they turned a deserted island into a large city. They were originally nomads. They wandered through the desert, and they weren't well liked. So they finally settled on an island. They grew their empire by war, and they made many enemies. They practiced human sacrifice to their war god. So when they captured their enemies, they used them for human sacrifices, which didn't sit well with the people. Some of their accomplishments were that their scribes wrote books about their gods, the history of their people. They also kept tax records and records of their territories. They harvested gold, silver, and copper, and their craftsmen made jewelry and headdresses, cloaks, and ornaments. The Aztecs made many enemies, and this will lead to their downfall. So at the time they make many enemies, and later on in history, this is actually going to work against them. I'd like you right now to make a prediction about what might happen when the Europeans come to Mexico, to the Aztec Empire. So think about what you know about what they've done to their enemies, and how might this affect them when the Europeans come. Please make sure to write 2 to 3 quality sentences explaining why you think that. So this new world that they discovered, why did Europeans call this the New World when we've already discovered that there were people already here? Again, please write 2 to 3 quality sentences explaining why. So some of the goals of the Portuguese and Spanish exploration, the first and major goal was they wanted to enlarge their empires with new lands. Right? More land equals more power. I'm going to add that here. More land equals more power. But they also want to acquire wealth. Okay, they find out that there's gold in the New World, so it becomes a need for more money. Now, they have the same goals. The Portuguese and the Spanish have the same goals, and this causes some trouble. So what do? In 1493, they draw the line of demarcation. The Pope comes in and he draws a line and he says, on this side, these lands can be claimed by Portugal, and on this side of the line, these lands can be claimed by Spain only. So it told them what they could claim and what they could explore, and it kept them separated. If you look on your textbook on page 198 to 199, you can see the line yourself. This was the part of a treaty called the Treaty of Tordesillas. So again, they have to kind of separate them because this is causing so much trouble. There's all this land and they both want it. So what was one of the goals of the Europeans for exploration? And how did the Pope keep them from fighting? So there's 2 parts to this question. Number 1, what was one of their goals? And number 2, how did the Pope keep them from fighting? Please make sure your answer answers both questions. So now that they have the line of demarcation, some other explorers come in, and one of them was Pedro Cabral. He actually claimed Brazil for Portugal. Now wait a minute. If we back up here, we see that most of South America is on the side for Spain. Well, how can he claim this if it's in South America? Well, the trick is that this was one of the few parts of South America that was on Portugal's side, and they're allowed to claim Brazil. So they go back and they eventually redraw the line, but they're allowed to keep Brazil. So if you've ever wondered why most countries in South America speak Spanish and Brazil speaks Portuguese, now you know, because Portugal claimed Brazil and was allowed to keep it. So why was Cabral able to claim Brazil for Portugal, even though it was in South America with Spain's territories? And last but not least, Ferdinand Magellan. He's one of probably our most famous explorers, other than Columbus. You might have heard of him. He led the first expedition to sail around the world. Now, I want to make this very clear. I have a spoiler alert at the bottom here. He is not the first explorer to travel all the way around the world. He leads the first expedition around the world. But unfortunately, he doesn't make it past the Philippines. So you'll see line C down here shows his journey. He travels down along the coast of South America, and he finds an opening right here. He sees Patagonia and the penguins. They name the Straits of Magellan after him. He even names the Pacific Ocean. They continue through the Pacific, and they make it all the way to the Philippines, where Magellan is killed. They try to convert the local people, and he is killed. But his crew does successfully make it back around the world. So he leads the expedition, but unfortunately he doesn't make it past the Philippines. So let's see if you can figure out which letter represents Magellan's route. A, B, or C. This is the end of our video today. Make sure to send me a K-mail and let me know that you've watched this video.